I would like to talk about optimal feeding in the farrowing unit. I believe that's one of the key factors to get success in the farrowing unit. If we look into nutrition of the sows around farrowing, we need to have an optimized farrowing process. We need to have short farrowings. So looking into the farrowing duration is an important task. If we look into the farrowing duration, we know that if there's more than 3 to 4 hours from the last meal until the sow starts to farrow, the duration will go up. The problem about long duration is the risk of stillbirth that will increase. So in hyperprolific sows with high litter size, we should have more than 1 or 2 meals a day. We should go for at least 3 meals evenly distributed around the clock. Looking into feeding the sows just around farrowing, Aarhus University has created some great results. These results showed that providing different levels of feed for the last 7 days before farrowing, it was found that the optimal level of feed when looking at farrowing duration is between 3.5 to 4 kilos of feed. At that level, the farrowing duration was very short, and more interestingly, also it resulted in a low level of stillbirth. Looking at the composition of lactation diets, especially around farrowing, fiber is important. We know from trials throughout the world that constipation is an issue around farrowing. So providing the lactation diet with extra fibers from soluble fiber sources like sugar beet pulp can decrease the level and the severity of constipation. Furthermore, Danish results has also shown that providing extra sugar beet pulp just before farrowing in the diet can decrease the level of stillborn. To optimize the farrowing process, nutrition of the sow is an important tool. We need to have 3 to 4 feedings per day. They should be evenly distributed around the clock to make sure the sow has energy available for the farrowing, irrespective of when she starts to farrow. Furthermore, we have to add the right amount of energy per day, again, so the sow has sufficient levels of energy for the farrowing process. Furthermore, we need to add fibers to the diet. Fibers can decrease both severity and degree of constipation, which is frequent in sows around farrowing. So addition of soluble fibers like sugar beet pulp before farrowing is a good way of optimizing the farrowing process. When maximizing milk production of lactating sows, we should look into the diet. Especially we should look at the level of SID crude protein and SID lysine per kilo of diet. Then when we look at these things, we often use the litter gain to determine what is the maximum output from the sow. So actually maximum litter gain is equal to maximum milk production. In Sigis, we've done some research for the last 5 to 6 years in this area, and we've shown that providing a concentration of 125 grams of SID crude protein per kilo of feed and 8.4 grams of SID lysine per kilo of feed, that maximizes the litter gain and thus the milk production. And when giving levels above this, you don't get any further litter gain. So actually, that's the best way of feeding the sows. Furthermore, all amino acids should be provided in the optimal ratios to lysine. You can find that in the DanBred feeding manuals. I often get the question, can we change something in the diet? Can we change something in the sow milk that can get the piglets to grow faster? The easy answer is that it is the amount of milk that makes the piglets grow faster. As shown in the graphics, it's actually, you can say, by ingesting more milk, the piglets will grow faster. So it's actually not just by changing some concentration of fat or protein in the milk that makes the big difference. It's the amount of milk. There is a general belief that piglets starts to grow slow in the beginning of lactation, and then the growth accelerates during lactation. However, the gain already within the first week is actually quite high. So the piglets are really capable of utilizing all this milk for gain. To optimize the lactation diet, we need to have the protein concentration in focus. As I mentioned, 125 grams of SID crude protein per kilo of feed and 8.4 grams of SID lysine per kilo of feed. That maximizes the milk production. Together with that, we should have an energy concentration around 9.6 to 10.1 megajoule of net energy per kilo in order to obtain a good feed consumption by the lactating sow. Choosing the right feeding curve for the sow is a challenge. In Segis, we did a study where we had a look at the effect of providing 10 to 15% extra feed within the first 14 days of lactation. In this study, we both observed the number of weaned piglets per litter. We observed the average daily litter gain of the litters. We had 2 herds in the trial. In both herds, we had no effect of additional feed on the number of weaned piglets per litter. So the nursing capacity was not increased by adding extra feed to the sow. Furthermore, we observed that the average daily litter gain, which expresses the milk yield, there was no effect of adding additional feed. There is a big difference between herd number 1 and herd number 2 in average daily gain, but there's no effect of the feeding level itself. However, when looking at the sow level, it gets interesting because providing these 10 to 15% extra feed for the first 14 days, actually in herd number 1, we succeeded by decreasing the mobilization of back fat by 0.5 millimeter throughout the lactation period. Whereas in herd number 2, there was no effect on the back fat mobilization. Herd number 2 was the herd with the low litter gain. So actually what this tells us is that if we have a herd with a high productivity, there is an idea of providing additional feed for the first 14 days in order to decrease the mobilization at the sow level in terms of protecting the next reproductive cycle. In Segis, we also looked at what is happening from day 15 and onwards to weaning at around day 26. What happens if we increase litter size and what happens if we increase the feed allowance of the sow. Looking at litter size going from 12 to 14 piglets, we get a significant increase in the average daily litter gain. So that it tells us that the sow milk production is increased by more piglets nursing the sow. However, adding extra feed, going from a low feeding curve that was 6.9 kilo at maximum until 8 kilo and further on to 9.2 kilo of litter gain, that actually did not affect the average daily litter gain significantly. So this tells us that if we increase the litter size, the sow will give more milk. If we add extra feed, actually we don't get any more milk out of that. Looking at these data, you might ask, what is the acceptable level of mobilization from sows during lactation? Looking at a lot of data from DanBred sows, a mobilization of 2 to 3 millimeters of back fat is no big problem. 4 millimeters is neither. These sows will still come into heat within 7 days after weaning. They are still capable of giving birth to 20 total born or even more in next parity. Looking at the weight loss in kilo, 15 to 18 kilos is no big problem. The sows are still capable of handling that and coming into heat and giving a good litter next parity. So this is a kind of robustness, we can say. Now there's been a lot of speak about the feeding curve, but we also have to go out into the stables and have a look at the individual sows. So looking at some pictures to tell us what to do, is the feed adjustment optimal or what should we change? Looking at this first picture, this is taken just 30 minutes after the sow was fed. In this picture we see that the sow has eaten the feed, but she has not spent the time licking the trough. So actually I would say this sow is fed very close to the optimal level, because at the next feeding this trough will be cleaned by the sow. In the next picture we can see, also taking 30 minutes after feeding, we can see that the sow has spent the time licking the entire trough. So actually this sow is fed below what she actually would have eaten. But it's always something you need to consider. You always need to take a careful look at the feeding trough. The big problem is if you see one like this picture, then we can see this sow, she's not eaten her ration half an hour after the feeding. So actually she was fed a little too much according to her appetite. And even worse, on the next picture we can see this sow has not eaten at all. The trough is filled. So in this way we have to take care of what is wrong. Is it the feed allowance, or is something wrong with the sow? In this case, the sow was sick, so that was the reason why she was not eating. Choosing the right feeding curve should take the litter size into consideration. If we have a litter size where sows are nursing 12 piglets, a maximal feed allowance of around 8.5 kilo per day in peak lactation and onwards is optimal. If litter size is increased from 12 to 14 piglets, we have to give an additional kilo of feed, so the sow should end up at 9.5 kilos of feed per day. You can find ideas for choosing the right feeding curves in the DanBred feeding manual. So how do you know if you've chosen the right feeding curve? You could look at the mobilization of back fat. If the mobilization of back fat is between 1 and 3 millimeters for the majority of the sows, that's good. If the sows are losing 0 to 15 kilos of body weight throughout lactation, that's good. But furthermore, if more than 92% of the sows are coming into heat within 7 days after weaning, then you know for sure that you've chosen the right feeding curve. When feeding is optimized, which litter gain can you actually expect from your sows? Looking at these figures from a recent SIGGIS trial, the average herd level in that trial was 3.2 kilo of litter gain per day. But as you might see, some sows are above 4 kilo of litter gain per day, and some sows are below 2 kilo of litter gain per day. This is the broad spectrum you might also see in your herd. So how does it look in your herd? If you look at the average daily litter gain from sows in your herd, if you calculate that and you have a look in this graphics, you can say if we're at the level below 2.6 kilos per day, I would say there's really room for improvement. If we're in the area from 2.6 kilos to 2.9 kilos per day from the average sow in your herd, then you could say there's still room for improvement. You're at the average level, I would say maybe a little below. If we're above 2.9 kilos per day and upwards, then it's actually what I would call the green light. But still, you need to improve. Everybody wants to improve. So go out and find out what is your herd level, because that tells us a lot about how is it working. Now we focus on feeding of the lactating sows. We know that it's of great importance how we feed the sows before farrowings in order to obtain quick farrowings and a low rate of stillborn. That's the number of meals per day, it's the feeding levels that matters. Then we've been looking throughout lactation using the feeding curve. Now we know that providing the sow with extra feed does not increase the litter gain. But we also know that providing extra feed for the sow will result in a lower weight loss and a lower mobilization of back fat. And thereby we should use the feeding curves to control the degree of mobilization in order to have a subsequent successful reproduction.